use my affiliate link to support the channel down in the description. Hey, what's up guys? It's MetaGamesGX here, and we are going to be doing an updated video on how to win against the meta decks, this time Phantom Nightmare edition. So we're going to be talking about the Fire King, Snake Eye, Voiceless Voice, and even Raid Raptor matchups, specifically through the lens of a branded Despia player. However, if you think that this video won't help you if you're on another deck, you would be sorely mistaken. So definitely make sure to keep watching this video. Stay tuned. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, turn on the bells for notifications, and leave a comment below what you guys think of this video. And if this video gets up to 200 likes, we're gonna release a video on 6 more hidden branded tips and tricks on that you probably didn't know, because I know you guys liked that video last time. So anyways, let's get right into it. Ground rules: that Ash sucks right now as a card for the most part because of the fire deck's ability to extend off of it by taking it with Hida. Droll isn't very good also because a lot of the time these decks are just gonna end up playing through Droll, the fire decks, unfortunately, unless they end up drawing a handful of non-extenders. And then also these decks run anti-spell and they all have one thing in common, where they have a very tough time with Puppet. They don't run anything in-house to really out these things unless the side deck really comes in outside of Bell, and we can always play around that card very easily. And with our engine, we're able to really just play through all of these decks. So I wanted to, and with correct selection of non-engine, I think that we can basically just take this deck and run through a tournament if you see 5 Fire King and just win against 5 Fire King. So as a primer for Fire King, as the most popular deck of the format currently, it seemingly is the strongest version of all the fire decks. So we're going to cover this one first and probably most in depth. So basically Fire King is so good right now because it sets up a board of huge amount of interruptions, whether it's Kieran, Arvada, and the Snake Eye cards through IP Masquerena, Zelantis, and Appaloosa played. But this is all through primary destruction removal, and Brand Despia is really good at playing through removal. You really don't need a whole lot on board in order to play through things, and then just like a lot of your effects just are able to play through a lot of the Fire King effects. You know, when you go normal summon Albaz, Aluber, or even when you play Branded Lost, you have a Fire King player sweating pretty badly. And then on top of that, Mirror Jade is really hard for this deck to out, because if you're just looping Mirror Jade 2 to 3 times, you can very easily break a Fire King board. And going first, even you have things like Gimmick Lock, which they aren't able to play through. A lot of the time, these boards that Fire King players end on actually don't have a negate up at the start. So when you go normal summon Albaz, you're basically going to get a free Mirror Jade or even Rinbrum at that point, which can get over the IP Masquerena plays. And then on top of that, your Mirror Jade just banishing the Flameberg or the Kieran to prevent the floating effect is really huge, right? On top of that, we have things like Super Poly, which is able to go into Mud Dragon, and you're able to call fire on the fire. This applies for really any deck that abuses the card Promethean Princess, so this will go forward for all the decks I talk going forward with our fire decks. If you call fire, the Promethean Princess is going to be unable to target a fire monster on the board in order to pop it and summon itself to extend its combo. So that's a huge thing right now that we have just in-house. Also, Forbidden Droplet is not bad for just cutting through a board, or once they set up the negate, or just like stopping the IP or the Flameberg. And then we have side deck cards that are very good against this deck. We have Cosmic Cyclone and Twin Twister, which is able to hit the Fire King Island, and if you hit the Fire King Island, you destroy all your opponent's monsters, which is a huge choke point for the deck. So definitely be running your Cosmic Cyclones. Lightning Storm and Feather Duster are not good because they usually have the Fire King Sanctuary on board, which prevents destruction of the Fire King Island. Also, we have thrust targets like Magical Reflector and DDG, which is able to give us a going first thrust target to play through being hand trapped. This deck also sometimes sides in anti-spell, so make sure to always be aware of that. Soul Release is also very good against this deck, on top of Bells and Crows, obviously. And then we can also always use the Shadal Fusion package, which is able to give us a body on top of like a Winda or App Cologne, and then banish 3 from their graveyard and target some of their really important fire monsters. And now we have the next best deck, Snake Eye. This is arguably as good, if not better than the Fire King's deck. It's just not as represented. This deck differs than Fire King because it sets up a lot more Omni negates in the form of Savage, Barone, and definitely goes more into the Abo lines a lot more. This is a harder matchup for Brand Despia because we don't always have the in-engine outs to just get over the Omni negates, like without just having a branded Lost available to us with a Retribution graveyard to replay it. They get rid of their grind game in order to put up these Omni negates that Fire King doesn't have, and they also use Jet Synchron in order to get into Formula Synchron, and then also sometimes Synchron your turn, which makes Talents and Thrust very live against this matchup, which is good. They also do Promethean Princess plays, so obviously the Mud Dragon play that we talked about before is going to be very important here, but their end boards aren't really able to be Mud Dragonable, unfortunately, unless you use one of your monsters to Super Poly. So for this reason, set Super Poly Albaz is actually quite good against this deck. Mirror Jade, obviously, on the Flame Burge is going to be super effective here because this card really just gets this deck rolling, because they're always going to be resolving this on your turn and their turn, and then using that to make Link fodder or Synchro fodder. Droplet's going to be your best friend in this matchup. I remember I just went to a regional and Forbidden Droplet was the best card in this matchup, completely able to blow out their 2 Omni negates. They sup, and then they're basically not able to do anything. Same things apply from the Fire King matchup. You know, DDG and the Spell Reflector on Thrust is actually quite good. They stop a lot of Omnis, so things like Dark Ruler No More is actually going to be way better here than a Super Poly. Super Poly is going to be quite ineffective here. And then Soul Release Shadal package, of course, is alongside Bells and Crows will be good. However, I recommend the latter because they just do more against these decks. And then obviously Cosmic, and for the anti-spell is going to be okay, but I think Twin Twister is actually way better in this matchup, or even a Lightning Storm or Feather Duster. Next, we have the Voiceless Voice. On its face, Voiceless Voice is a very cool deck. It's very much like Turion in the fact it's mid-range. It does the same thing basically every turn, but very well. It loops in Omni Negate plus the Ceravis Ritual monster in hand or on field to prevent you from summoning, and then also a monster Ceravis that's able to spin back and generate more advantage on top of a field pop by shuffling back cards with a trap, and then also a spell card in the graveyard that is able to banish on your turn to special summon a Skull Guardian, which is the Omni Negate of the deck. Now there's a few different vital choke points with this deck that we gotta go over before we get into tech cards that's very good in this matchup and how to beat this matchup. Low needs to be on field for Skull Guardian to basically give it its stats and its, more importantly, its Omni Negate. The Omni Negate proves to be the biggest threat against your deck because they're able to obviously stop Brand Fusion without Lost, but this is why Lost conversely does very good against this deck. Now, if you heard me before with a spell card that's able to banish from the graveyard and special summon out Ace Omni Negate even after you get rid of the first one, that means that Super Poly isn't as effective as you'd like it to be unless you get rid of the spell card. Most of the time, they're going to have the spell card in the graveyard, so you're going to have to be tricky with how you deal with the Voiceless Voice. They also have a Odd Eyes Pendulum monster that some of these builds run that is a spell negate, which can't. For that reason, though, Mirror Jade and Guardian Chimera are going to be your best friends against this deck because they aren't easily able to out these cards, and then also Guardian Chimera does not target, which gets over their untargetability clause that a lot of their cards give them. Droplet's very good in this matchup for this very reason, to get rid of all these board presence. Basically, once you get rid of all the effects without even removing the monster, this is how you get over the Voiceless board, so I think Droplet's honestly the best card into this deck. Droll's actually very good against this deck, though, because it searches a lot, and they don't have as many extenders that don't just search, so they basically usually lose to a Droll unless they have all the pieces in their hand already. Brand loss is going to be very important in this matchup, obviously, too. Sometimes you also see a branded variation of this deck, but for that reason, it's going to be a lot easier of a matchup because you can obviously play into your triple tactics talents and take their Mirror Jade, because they usually will just end up ending on a Mirror Jade on top of the Voiceless board, but it doesn't really do them a whole lot. So for that reason, this matchup is way easier than just the typical Voiceless matchup, which has a lot more non-engine that you have to deal with, which really that's where it comes down to. If they just have a handful of non-engine on top of their board, it's going to be a tough matchup no matter what. And then for the last deck of the format 2, we have Raid Raptor. Raid Raptor is annoying because they set up towers, which is one of the harder concepts in the game for us to deal with. A towers monster is usually what it means is an unaffected by all other card effects monster with a big body. So most of the time your only form of removal is to get around it with certain effects like a Mirror Jade, if you're able to, which we'll talk about in the case with Raid Raptors, or something like a Herald of the Abyss, which forces your opponent to send one of their monsters. So what in this case can we do to get over probably one of our hardest matchups? Well, they have a huge choke point before they set up the towers. It's the Raiders Knight. If you imperm this, you are basically looking pretty good for the most part. However, most of the time we aren't going to be running hand traps, so we're going to have to deal with their board as is. So in this case, it's going to be pretty hard. They set up towers that is around 3,000, other towers that's like 43 to 5,000, I believe. I'll have the correct number on the screen. This means that we're going to have to use our thinking seals and go into things like Titanclad and Dragoon in our main deck just to boost themselves up in order to run over these things. Titanclad can usually get over the lower one, however, Dragoon will be the one that needs to get up to 5k. Obviously, you're able to negate and gain 1,000, then negate on your opponent's turn to gain another 1,000. Usually, this isn't going to be enough, but sometimes it is. This is always an option. I think what happens most of the time is you're going to want to side in hand traps, board breakers, win those games 2 and 3 with your non-engine, and then also Herald of the Abyss, keeping that thing on you for purrely, which towers are your worst matchups. We're going to have a video on that talking about how to get over towers in general with branded. You should really have that in your side deck probably, just in case, to cover your ground. With that being said, please leave a like and a comment below, turn on the bell, and check out all the links below, and let me know what you guys thought about this video. If you guys want to see more learning branded content, make sure that you're subscribed, and I'll be seeing you guys later. Special shout out to the channel members. We have recently started channel memberships, so if you'd like to support the channel for $5 a month and get some great channel perks, including getting all of my deck lists early and some early videos, then make sure to sign up. You also get a cool shout out. So shout out to this month's channel members, Yuri Diaz and Foss Squared. Thank you guys so much.